Indian immigration to the Caribbean, shaping history, culture, and society with a focus on Guyana. The period between 1838 and 1917 marks a significant chapter in the history of the Caribbean, witnessing the arrival of an estimated 500,000 indentured servants from India to work on the plantations of various European colonies. This large-scale migration was a direct response to the changing labor landscape following the abolition of slavery, and its impact reverberates through the demographics, culture, and society of the region to this day. Among the Caribbean nations that received these immigrants, Guyana stands out for the substantial number of Indian laborers it welcomed, making their story particularly pertinent to understanding the broader narrative of Indian immigration to the Caribbean. This paper aims to explore the multifaceted history of this migration, delving into the reasons behind it, the experiences of those who undertook it, their enduring contributions, and the long-term impact on the Caribbean, with a specific lens on the Guyanese experience. The system of Indian indentured servitude in the Caribbean emerged in the 19th century, spanning from 1838 to 1917. This period directly followed the emancipation of slaves in the British Empire in 1833, which became effective in 1834, and later in other European colonies, such as the French and Dutch territories. The primary impetus for the establishment of this system was the acute labor shortage that arose on the sugar plantations, which formed the economic backbone of the Caribbean. Planters, facing the departure of newly freed African laborers who were understandably reluctant to continue working under exploitative conditions for meager wages, sought a new, reliable, and inexpensive labor source to sustain their profitable sugar production. Initial attempts to utilize emancipated slaves and laborers from Europe proved largely unsuccessful due to factors such as climate incompatibility and the unwillingness of formerly enslaved people to return to plantation labor under similar conditions. The model of Indian indentured labor had already been implemented with perceived success in colonies like Mauritius and British Guyana, making it an appealing solution for Caribbean planters. Although framed as a system of free labor contracts, the indentured system often mirrored the harsh realities of slavery in its coercive nature and exploitative conditions. The countries that became key destinations for Indian indentured servants included a range of European colonies. Within the British Empire, British Guyana, now Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica received the largest numbers, alongside smaller populations in Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, St. Kitts, and Belize. French colonies such as Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guyana, and Réunion also participated in this labor importation. Additionally, the Dutch colony of Suriname and the Danish colony of St. Croix were part of this system, although St. Croix received only a single shipload of Indian laborers. Guyana, then known as British Guyana, held a particularly significant position in the history of Indian indentured servitude in the Caribbean. It was among the first destinations, with the initial voyages of the ships Hesperus and Whitby in 1838, marking the commencement of this large-scale labor migration. By the time the system was terminated in 1917, Guyana had received the largest contingent of Indian immigrants in the entire Caribbean, with estimates reaching around 238,909 individuals. The very initiation of this organized labor system in Guyana is often referred to as the Gladstone experiment, named after John Gladstone, a prominent plantation owner who played a key role in lobbying for and establishing the scheme. Indentureship in Guyana spanned from 1838 to 1917, experiencing only a brief suspension between 1839 and 1845 due to early concerns and reports of mistreatment. The decision to emigrate from India during this period was driven by a complex interplay of socio-economic and political pressures within the subcontinent under British colonial rule. Economically, India was plagued by widespread poverty and recurrent famines, which claimed the lives of millions. The policies of the British Raj led to the deindustrialization of India, causing the decline of traditional cottage industries and leaving countless artisans and weavers unemployed. Furthermore, the imposition of high land revenue rates and the exploitative practices of the zamindari system pushed many farmers into cycles of debt and landlessness. While the wages offered in the Caribbean, though often misrepresented by recruiters, appeared higher than the meager earnings in India, this economic incentive was often the result of dire circumstances at home. The overarching force of imperial capitalism further eroded traditional livelihoods across the Indian landscape. Social structures within India also played a significant role in the emigration. The rigid Hindu caste system, particularly for those in the lower strata, imposed severe limitations on socio-economic mobility and subjected individuals to systemic oppression. For many, indentureship offered a potential escape from the constraints and indignities of the caste system. Beyond the broader social hierarchy, individuals also sought to escape personal socio-economic bondage and abusive personal relationships. The promises of a better future in the colonies, even if often based on deception by recruiting agents, appealed to those facing social discontent and hardship in India. The political climate of 19th century India under British rule also contributed to the push for emigration. The political upheaval following events like the Mutiny of 1857 created a sense of instability and uncertainty. The overarching impact of British colonial rule on the traditional Indian economy and the welfare of its people generated widespread hardship. The lack of political rights and the experience of oppression under colonial rule further fueled the desire for a new life in a different part of the world. The Caribbean, in the wake of slavery's abolition, presented a compelling set of pull factors that created a substantial demand for Indian laborers. The end of slavery in the British Empire in 1833, effective 1834, followed by similar actions in French and Dutch colonies, resulted in a critical shortage of labor on the plantations. Newly emancipated Africans, having endured generations of forced labor, were understandably reluctant to continue working on the plantations for the low wages and under the harsh conditions offered by the planters. The apprenticeship system, intended as a transitional phase, also faced significant resistance and ultimately failed to provide a sufficient labor force. Sugar production, a highly labor-intensive industry, formed the economic backbone of the Caribbean colonies. To maintain the profitability of their estates, planters actively sought a cheap, reliable, and controllable source of labor to replace the enslaved Africans. The demand for labor extended beyond sugar to other valuable crops such as coffee, tea, and cocoa. Initial attempts to recruit laborers from other regions, including Europe, Africa, and China, proved largely unsuccessful due to various factors like cost, inability to adapt to the tropical climate, or a lack of inclination towards plantation work. Indian laborers, on the other hand, were perceived by the planters as being well suited to the tropical climate and accustomed to agricultural labor, making them a preferred choice to fill the labor vacuum. The journey from India to the Caribbean was a long and arduous undertaking, often lasting between 10 to 20 weeks, and in the earlier days before the advent of steam power, could extend up to 200 days. Conditions on board the ships were notoriously harsh, characterized by severe overcrowding and cramped quarters, frequently drawing comparisons to the infamous slave ships of the past. Poor sanitation and hygiene were rampant, creating fertile grounds for the rapid spread of debilitating and often fatal diseases such as dysentery, cholera, typhoid, and measles. The provision of food and fresh water was often inadequate, further contributing to the suffering and weakening the already vulnerable travelers. While men and women were typically segregated on board, this measure did little to safeguard women from the threats and acts of sexual harassment and abuse perpetrated by the ship's crew and officials. Many immigrants recounted experiences of mistreatment and corporal punishment during the voyage. The psychological toll of the journey, marked by loneliness, uncertainty, and brutalizing conditions, was immense. Adding to their distress, some immigrants were reportedly unaware of their final destination or the true length of the voyage, having been misled by recruiters. The mortality rates during these voyages were alarmingly high. On average, around 17% of Indians traveling to the Caribbean in 1856 to 57 perished at sea due to the deplorable conditions and the outbreak of diseases. Infants and young children were particularly vulnerable, suffering even higher mortality rates. Deaths resulted from a combination of factors, including the spread of contagious diseases, the overall poor living conditions on board, and, tragically, instances of suicide by individuals driven to despair. Mortality rates fluctuated between different voyages, with some ships experiencing exceptionally high numbers of deaths due to outbreaks of cholera and other illnesses. Upon arrival in the Caribbean, the Indian immigrants faced a harsh reality on the plantations. Living conditions were often squalid, with laborers housed in barrack-type quarters that were frequently the same dilapidated structures previously occupied by enslaved Africans. These accommodations lacked privacy and suffered from inadequate ventilation. Poor sanitation and the insufficient provision of clean drinking water led to the widespread prevalence of diseases such as malaria, dysentery, and cholera. The wages paid to the laborers were meager, typically around 25 cents per day for adult males and 16 cents for adult females, and were often subject to arbitrary deductions and the extension of tasks to maximize the planter's benefit. The workload was demanding, with unrealistic tasks and long working hours, especially during the harvesting season, which could extend to 6 9-hour days a week. The movement of indentured laborers was severely restricted. They were not permitted to leave the plantation without explicit permission, and were often required to carry passes. The legal system in the Caribbean colonies was heavily biased against the Indian laborers, with even minor breaches of contract and immigration laws often resulting in criminal prosecution. Medical care on the plantations was often substandard, with estate hospitals frequently in deplorable conditions and lacking adequate resources. High rates of infant mortality further reflected the harsh living conditions and inadequate health care available to the immigrant communities. Working conditions on the plantations were equally arduous. Indian immigrants were primarily deployed for the most labor-intensive tasks, including cutting sugarcane, weeding, and working in the mills. The combination of the physically demanding work, long hours, and low wages took a significant toll on their health, especially after the grueling transatlantic voyage. Laborers were often subjected to corporal punishment, including whipping, and faced fines for even minor mistakes or failing to complete their assigned tasks. The planters wielded considerable control over virtually every aspect of the indentured laborers' lives and their labor. The interactions between the newly arrived Indian immigrants and other ethnic groups in the Caribbean, particularly the recently freed African populations, were often fraught with tension. Competition for limited work opportunities and the low wages offered to the Indian laborers, which undercut the earning potential of the formerly enslaved Africans, contributed to these strained relationships. Colonial authorities frequently exacerbated these divisions, implementing policies that kept the black and Indian communities separate. Initially, there was limited social mixing between the groups due to significant cultural and religious differences. However, instances of intermarriage did occur, particularly between Indian immigrants and individuals from other ethnic groups, such as the Chinese, often driven by the significant gender imbalance within the Indian immigrant population. Despite the immense hardships they faced, Indian immigrants made profound and lasting cultural contributions to the Caribbean, with Guyana serving as a vibrant example of this transformation. In the realm of cuisine, they introduced staple dishes like curry, roti, and dal bhat, which have become foundational elements of Caribbean food culture. They also brought with them a rich array of Indian spices, such as turmeric, cumin, coriander, and garam masala, which are now integral to local cooking. New vegetables and fruits like mangoes, jackfruit, tamarind, and eggplant were also introduced and have become staples in the Caribbean diet. Unique Indo-Caribbean dishes, such as doubles in Trinidad and cook-up rice and palauri in Guyana, emerged as a result of this cultural exchange. In Guyana specifically, popular dishes like seven curry, roti, dal, and snacks like salsev and pulauri are widely enjoyed. The religious landscape of the Caribbean was also significantly altered by Indian immigration. Hinduism and Islam became established religions, particularly in Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname, where substantial Indo-Caribbean populations reside. The grand celebrations of festivals such as Diwali, Holi, Phagua, and Eid are now vibrant aspects of Caribbean culture. In Guyana, these traditions are widely observed, with holidays like Diwali and Phagua recognized as national celebrations. Over time, a degree of syncretism and adaptation of religious practices has also occurred within the Caribbean context. Indian immigrants also enriched the musical traditions of the Caribbean, introducing new instruments and forms that contributed to the development of genres like chutney and tassa music. The blending of Indian and Caribbean rhythms and melodies created unique musical expressions. Bollywood films and music continue to enjoy considerable popularity, particularly among Indo-Guyanese communities. In Guyana, chutney music, with its roots in Indian folk songs, stands as a significant and vibrant form of cultural expression. The linguistic landscape of the Caribbean also bears the imprint of Indian immigration, with words from Bhojpuri, Hindi, and Tamil finding their way into various Caribbean Creole languages. In some regions, a distinct lingua franca, known as Caribbean Hindustani, developed. In Guyana, Hindi has influenced Guyanese Creole, with numerous Hindi words, particularly those related to food and cultural practices, still in common usage. Furthermore, Indian immigrants influenced social customs across the Caribbean. Traditional Indian marriage practices, family structures emphasizing the extended family, and various social norms have been adopted and adapted. The celebration of traditional Indian festivals and cultural events has become an integral part of the Caribbean social calendar. In Guyana, the observance of Hindu and Muslim holidays, alongside the commemoration of Indian Arrival Day, are significant social customs that highlight the enduring legacy of this migration. Over time, Indian communities in the Caribbean have undergone significant socio-economic integration, achieving notable progress despite facing numerous challenges. Initially relegated to the lowest rungs of plantation society, they gradually transitioned from indentured laborers to landowners, particularly in the agricultural sector, cultivating rice and sugarcane and raising cattle. They diversified their occupations, entering various professions including trade, business, law, medicine, and education, contributing significantly to the economic development of the Caribbean. Vibrant communities and villages were established, fostering a sense of belonging and cultural continuity. In Guyana, Indo-Guyanese have emerged as the largest ethnic group, playing a dominant role in agriculture, business, and various professions. However, this integration was not without its hurdles. Indian communities faced discrimination and marginalization from other ethnic groups. They encountered economic disparities and limited job opportunities in certain sectors, along with the challenges of navigating new languages and cultural norms. Social issues such as gender-based violence and mental health challenges also affected the community. In Guyana, the socio-economic integration process was further complicated by ethnic tensions and political polarization, particularly between Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese communities. Despite these challenges, Indo-Caribbean communities have become significant parts of the population in many Caribbean nations. They hold positions of considerable power and influence across various fields of society. In Guyana, Indo-Guyanese constitute the largest ethnic group and play a dominant role in the nation's political and economic landscape. The long-term impact of Indian immigration on the Caribbean has been transformative. Demographically, it has fundamentally altered the ethnic composition of several nations, with substantial Indian populations now residing in Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname. In Guyana, Indo-Guyanese represent approximately 2/5 of the population, making them the largest ethnic group in the country. The intermingling of populations has also led to the emergence of mixed ethnicities, such as the Douglas community of African and Indian descent. Politically, the increased participation and representation of Indo-Caribbean communities have become significant over time. Political parties representing Indo-Caribbean interests have formed, particularly in Guyana and Trinidad, reflecting the growing political consciousness and influence of these communities. In Guyana, the political landscape has been profoundly shaped by the presence of Indo-Guyanese, leading to periods of both political dominance and ethnic tension with other groups. Socially, Indian immigration has been instrumental in creating the vibrant multicultural societies that characterize the Caribbean today, blending Indian, African, European, and indigenous traditions. It has led to a significant transformation of social customs, family structures, and community life. In Guyana, the social landscape is a rich tapestry woven from the threads of Indian heritage, alongside African and Amerindian influences, although the historical legacy of colonial divisions continues to present sensitivities. In conclusion, the immigration of Indian indentured servants to the Caribbean between 1838 and 1917 represents a pivotal moment in the region's history. Driven by a complex interplay of push factors from India and pull factors from the Caribbean, this migration brought hundreds of thousands of individuals to new lands, where they endured immense hardships, but also demonstrated remarkable resilience. Their cultural contributions have indelibly shaped the cuisine, religion, music, language, and social customs of the Caribbean, creating a vibrant and diverse cultural mosaic. While the journey of socio-economic integration has been marked by both achievements and challenges, Indian communities have forged a significant place in Caribbean society, holding considerable influence in various spheres. Finally, the long-term impact of this migration on the demographics, politics, and social landscape of the Caribbean, particularly in Guyana, is profound and continues to shape the region's identity in the 21st century. The story of Indian immigration to the Caribbean stands as a testament to the enduring spirit and transformative power of diaspora communities.
This message comes to you from the Mahadeo Foundation. Please visit our website, mahadeo.foundation, and join our evening prayers in the virtual Temple of Light. Be welcome to send your comments and suggestions, and subscribe to our newsletter, the Arya Marga.